that would go above the rights holder. If we got the EU to ratify the Beijing Treaty, this would be a regulation, a global regulation, that would mean that either the rights holder and YouTube would have to pay some kind of income into a collective rights management society.
Like that's a kind of ocean boiling solution, that's a fix-all. The problem you're going to find immediately with that, I'm not opposing that solution, it's just going, okay, great, if that appears, the issue with YouTube at the moment is most of the stuff on there hasn't been claimed, and there is nobody to tell YouTube who owns stuff.
Yeah.
And the information they get is flawed, faulty, dodgy, rubbish. So they.
Well, I have to say that you're giving them a very easy ride at the moment.
Well, no,
I mean,
so they have a defence that they're like, hey, we've tried to pay these people, and we have paid some people, and they would like, I do believe them that they would like to monetize the rest of it that hasn't been identified. But at any point where we go to the consumer or the buyer, be they a business, a service, a Spotify, YouTube or whatever, and we say, you're not paying us enough, we do have to be able to go to them and tell them what it is that we own and what rate we'd like to negotiate for.
Because as far as I understand, they heavily invested in the whole technology about tracking all this and who belongs to what and how can we generate revenue out of it.
That's another solution that we as artists, producers, songwriters, small labels need to start doing. We need to make sure, and I mean Helienne has a conflict in this because she works with a company called Audley, but there are various solutions around.
It's not a conflict, it's a solution. That's what it is.
But something like Audley, I'm on the ISRC steering committee to try and make sure that the register of ISRC really work for everybody, and that the data is there imprinted within the stuff so that Google can find out whose music it is that they're playing and where the rights go. But the trouble is with ISRCs, and I find as a producer, I've had records that are on the radio, and then I get some intern from a record company phone me up and say, we need the label copy for this, please. Who played on it? What are all the musicians' numbers? And you still have to send in. Then you get all the musicians to send in, find their PPL number and their PRS number, fill in MU forms, send them off to some intern who then fills it in wrongly. And of course the data is not there in the thing. So what we need to do is provide something like Audley, which is
Can I explain what it is?
Yeah, you do it. Sorry.
In a very short thing.
Please,
and the reason I got involved is a producer-songwriter friend of mine that I've worked with, he wanted a solution to a problem, which is usually when you come up with the best ideas, and this was the problem. And one of the main problems is actually why we don't get paid properly either is because songwriters and producers are notoriously crap at filling out forms and sending in forms and whatever, and there's something that you only realize when you don't get paid that something, but where is the problem in this whole scheme? And your IPI number, for example, like every songwriter has an identification, which is their IPI number. And if I would ask, yesterday at the songwriters thing, what their IPI number, I would say that maybe one person knows what their IPI number is. And everything is attached to this number, everything that you get paid. So what happens now is when the record comes out, suddenly everyone's scrambling and somebody's calling up the producer or the songwriter and said, okay, the record is about to come out, what's the IPI number? What was the split that you decided on when you wrote this song 2 years ago? I can barely remember the last name of the person I worked with 2 years ago. So this is actually, what this is a digital solution where you would have either an app on your iPhone or a program in your computer, whichever way you want to use it, that it makes it so easy to get all this information in one place for every song that there's, for a songwriter and producer, there is no excuse for not using it.
From the point of conception, so when your session player comes in, you say, what's your Audley number?
Just your name, you just put the name in, and they're attached, because they're all their information.
Yeah. Exactly, but so it's a great example of the tech solutions are out there. And a lot of the problems we're talking about is identification.
And we work with PRS and PPL, so they identify the people that are being used, because to them it's a solution that they really need, because they get really faulty registrations.
Maybe just one other question to maybe change a little bit the context. When we're talking about all these organizations on the national level representing now, whether it will be the managers, the artists, the composers, whoever, when we're talking about legislation and lobbying, do you feel well represented, and do you think that compared to a company like Google or whoever, Google is always the wow, yeah, the one thing we can talk about, but there are others, iTunes, etc., Apple. Do you think there are negotiations at eye level?
No, I think that, I mean, particularly as a songwriter, I do think that it's, from what I can see with the Collection Society, they feel that they can't speak out properly, because obviously they have members on their boards that come from the major companies, and whether it's a major publisher, and certain major publishers are more in cahoot with their labels than others, and you know, if the major label is always going to be way heavier than the major publisher, so they will lean on the publishers. They tell the PRO to sign this deal, tell them to sign this deal with YouTube or whatever, because if the publishers don't, we're not going to get paid. So I think that songwriters don't feel like they're properly represented. And I think that's why you get now organizations like BASCA, and I'm sure there's an equivalent in Denmark, that are just realizing that we have to stand up for ourselves and talk amongst ourselves and actually speak out, because nobody's speaking on our behalf.
The managers don't need representation. The reason we come together as managers to discuss stuff is to try and improve the situation for the author and the performer, and we can't say, I'm not an artist, I can't say I'm the Artists Association. So we come together to try and figure out the people that we represent, their business model. There's two blocks there. There's the authors and the performers. Helienne just brilliantly described the conflicts of interest that exist at the intermediaries, the collection societies, the labels, the publishers, in fixing all of these problems. And then also she referred previously to the technological solutions that are out there. So we have to ask, why are the tech solutions not being applied? What's that conflict of interest?
Who gains from that not being so?
You got the answer?
There's a friend of I just have a good comment about it. There's a friend of mine who I was having this conversation with called Chris Castle, who's a lawyer in the States and fights for artists' rights. And I was saying this, but look, surely this solution is going to happen, because in the past, the reason, artists and songwriters only ever got paid the crumbs off the table. But when you were getting the crumbs off the table of a 15 quid CD, if you sold enough, you could do quite well. But now we're getting the crumbs off the table of a 0.0067 stream. We have to mobilise and do something about it. And and I was saying that surely with all the information is available now. You can't obscure it any longer. In my old contract, it said you're not allowed to audit Universal in Spain, because that would mean that Universal in Spain would have to send over boxes full of Spanish reams of paper just for you, and it's not feasible and realistic. Whereas I can phone up my publisher now and say, what did I sell in Spain? And it's just so the data is there. And at the moment, to an extent, they won't be able to keep. There can be no obscurity. Transparency will have to happen. But my friend Chris Castle said, "Oh, for God's sake, Crispin." What was it? Transparency.
There's only one thing that record labels fear more than piracy, and it's transparency.
Accuracy is more of a threat to these guys than piracy ever was.
Yeah, I mean, we even haven't touched the whole discussion about the value of data and everything. I mean, you have been yesterday on the songwriter panels. Jake and myself, we had the pleasure to be in the other room when there was the branding panels, and there was Jack Horner with his keynote, and he said something like, correct me if I'm not getting it right, I mean the whole streaming, it's there, it's working, and okay, it's maybe there are some details that are not really solved already, but it will work out very soon and we're fine.
That's the implication, that the industry will take care of itself. And we've been in this situation for long enough that if the labels, the publishers and the collection societies were going to do something about it,
It would have happened by now.
approach these guys, and they haven't. And it's in their interest to sustain it. And when you look from the outside at other industries, they have a much higher churn rate at CEO level than particularly the record companies have. They have not changed their business deals. Crispin mentioned at the beginning all the deals that he sees, the recording agreements. They're not radically different. The radical difference between a piece of vinyl and a stream on a mobile phone is extreme. The back-end paperwork has not changed, and the artists are in a weak negotiating position to change it.
Yeah.